My brothers and sisters, may the Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus and his disciples came to the other side of the sea, to the territory of the Gerasenes. When he got out of the boat, at once a man from the tombs who had an unclean spirit met him. The man had been dwelling among the tombs, and no one could restrain him any longer, even with a chain. In fact, he had frequently been bound with shackles and chains, but the chains had been pulled apart by him and the shackles smashed, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the hillsides, he was always crying out and bruising himself with stones. Catching sight of Jesus from a distance, he ran up and prostrated himself before him, crying out in a loud voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." He had been saying to him, "Unclean spirit, come out of the man." He asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "Legion is my name. There are many of us." And he pleaded earnestly with him not to drive them away from that territory. Now a large herd of swine was feeding there on the hillside, and they pleaded with him, "Send us into the swine, let us enter them." And he left them, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the swine. The herd of about 2,000 rushed down a steep bank into the sea, where they were drowned. The swineherds ran away and reported the incident in the town and throughout the countryside, and people came out to see what had happened. As they approached Jesus, they caught sight of the man who had been possessed by Legion, sitting there clothed and in his right mind, and they were seized with fear. Those who witnessed the incident explained to them what had happened to the possessed man and to the swine, and then they began to beg him to leave their district. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed pleaded to remain with him, but Jesus would not permit him, but told him instead, "Go home to your family and announce to them all that the Lord in his pity has done for you." And then the man went off and began to proclaim in the Decapolis what Jesus had done for him, and all were amazed. The Gospel of the Lord. We find in Mark's account of Jesus' ministry and mission in these early pages sort of the unfolding of the significance of who Jesus is and what he is capable of doing. We find both when he enters the area of Galilee and in turn the area of the Gerasenes today, he begins his journey in these places and his teaching there with an exorcism of some force of unclean spirits. And in both instances, of course, it is a reminder on the part of Mark that this Jesus comes really to dispel all darkness, to do away with all evil, and has the power to succumb it and to make it go away. We have a very powerful image of that today as Jesus encounters this man in the tombs who is filled with a legion, we're told. And a legion, according to the Roman army, were 6,000 men. So the idea of this unclean spirit calling itself a legion bespeaks the fact that it was a very strong, powerful force of evil. I'm sure everybody in the encountering of this experience, of course, had very mixed feelings about it. In the case of the man who had been succumbed by this for so many years, it was the freedom that all of a sudden felt as he found himself once again complete, whole, and normal. And in turn, the excitement that must have occurred for him as he wanted to continue to be with Jesus. And Jesus says, "No, you stay here and teach the message of what has happened to you. Prepare other people for the awareness of that message." But the other group that probably didn't care for it so much was the person who owned all the swine, because all of these legions went into these pigs, and 2,000 pigs went down into the water and were drowned. And so rather than being happy at the fact that Jesus was there, they're very quick to say, "Thanks, but no thanks. Please leave our territory." And of course, Jesus leaves and goes back again towards Galilee. In both instances, of course, as before in Galilee and now in turn the Gerasenes, he shows his power over evil. And the whole ministry that he bespeaks during the course of his journey before the crucifixion event ends up being always a conquering of evil. And the ultimate conquering, of course, happens with his death on the cross. We, in turn, have been the ones who have gained the product and the gift of that. The letter of the Hebrews today talks about all these various signs of God's power in the course of the Old Testament tradition. But the Hebrew writer ends it by suggesting that even though all these things were good, God had something far better in store for us. What he had in store for us is the coming of Jesus Christ. And so we gather today as a people of faith and thanksgiving for that gift God has given us in his Son. We pray in turn that as we ourselves try to overcome the little forces of evil within us, they're always open with a sense of grace to God's working in our lives and in our hearts.